Hey guys, so today I'm going to be talking about the new Netflix original film, The Outsider, which stars Jared Leto. Now this movie is going to be set around Jared Leto's character. He's the main character. This film is set in 1954 Japan, and as you can guess by the title, Jared Leto is an outsider who ends up joining a yakuza, or essentially a Japanese mafia, family. Now when I first saw the trailer for The Outsider, I immediately thought, okay, here's another whitewashed white guy coming to save some Asian culture situation, very much like The Great Wall and countless other movies that have come out where a white character saves somehow miraculously a giant Asian sort of culture or overcomes some adversity, whatever you want to call it. I immediately thought that. This movie kind of has that element to it, but it avoids it in a lot of ways. He's not necessarily the savior, although it kind of does tilt that way at some points. But I was surprised that it wasn't full on that type of movie. But to be completely honest with you, The Outsider, it's just not a good movie, being quite frank. This movie did not impress me in any way, and I just really didn't like it at all. The story of this movie is really, really weak. It's really mundane. There's really nothing exciting about it, and it's extremely disappointing that it just brings nothing new to the table. It's just sort of this bland story about Jared Leto's character who saves a guy and then ends up inadvertently joining a yakuza family, and for the most part, nothing else really happens. There's some small events that happen, but in this it's a little over 2 hours, I think, of a runtime of a movie. Almost nothing exciting happens that really captivated me and really made me interested in the movie. I ended up being on my phone for part of it, which was kind of sad. Bright at least kept me entertained with new things and things in the world that I was interested in. This movie brought me nothing. There was really no element to it that really made me want to delve deeper into it and know more about it, especially since there were a lot of things that they just weren't willing to tell us. And what I mean by that is specifically Jared Leto's character. His performance is pretty much non-existent in this movie. He essentially just stands there or sits there or lays there with a blank face, with that sort of hardened look on his face, and he barely says anything. He does have a handful of lines, maybe two handfuls if you really want to stretch it, but he doesn't really say anything interesting or really do anything interesting for the majority of this movie. There's a lot of confusion with this character. We don't know anything about his backstory till probably about 3/4 of the way through the movie when he runs into somebody from his past. We don't really find out much about why he is where he starts. We don't really find out much about him, what his motivations are. There's certain points in the movie where he takes action, and you sort of wonder, is it just because he's crazy? Is it because he has some sort of deep past? What's this guy's sort of deal? But we never really get told anything about the character, and Jared Leto certainly doesn't bring anything to it. He's mostly just a stoic guy. He's essentially a placeholder for the majority of the movie. Although he's the main character, he essentially holds a place and serves no purpose to a grander story, even though it's supposed to be his story. I feel like there's just nothing that he offered, or even the movie itself offered, and that's just not really good at all. The only person that I felt like tried a little bit was Tadanobu Asano, who plays sort of the person who helps Jared Leto's character the most. He was the only person that I kind of was interested in, but even then there were only certain aspects that I was interested in. He also was kind of flat in a lot of areas. This movie was essentially that. It was just flat. There was really nothing to offer, except for that character I felt like had something interesting about him, but again, we just never find out what it was. Now, as for the directing of The Outsider, it was just sort of all right. It didn't really offer any interesting camera angles. It was pretty much flat. There was really nothing grand about it. It wasn't sort of trying to capture your imagination in any way or present anything new. It was pretty much standard shots for the most part. It just never really looked visually interesting. It didn't have that visual appeal. Just sort of 1954 Japan. I don't know if it was the fact that they just didn't quite have the budget to really make it come alive, or what it was. The sets really weren't overly fantastic, but then again, a lot of that Japanese culture is pretty simplified, so kind of have to give that a pass. As far as the editing, I think that's probably one of the worst things next to Leto that is about this entire movie. The editing is really bad. It has a lot of cuts to things that you have no idea why we're cutting to it, and then we'll cut back to what's happening in the present, and then we'll just sort of have to make a connection, or it won't even cut back to the present. We'll just make a cut, and we'll just let it go from there. And it's just really confusing and hard to watch at times when those cuts happen. You just have to ask yourself, wait a minute, what just happened? Where are we now? There's just so many questions that go unanswered, and then they just sort of make you figure it out. I just really didn't like the editing. Most of the movie overall, I just really didn't enjoy myself. And I felt like there could have been a story here, maybe somewhere deep down, but it just really wasn't that interesting to me. Perhaps somebody else watching it can find something interesting in it. But for me personally, there was very little to be offered here. There were some little nuggets, but not enough to really make me want to watch this movie again. And it even had me checking my watch during the runtime. And I think this movie's way too long for what it offers. And for that reason, the overall grade that I have to give The Outsider is a D-. Now, usually I try and look for the good in a lot of movies. I give grades a lot higher than I think some movies probably deserve. But this one just really was not doing it for me whatsoever. So I think the grade very much fits this movie. Just didn't have anything to offer me whatsoever. But it's definitely on Netflix now if you feel like checking it out, wasting a little over 2 hours of your time. Feel free to check it out. Hopefully you'll find something in it more interesting than I did. Like I said, it's now streaming on Netflix. Feel free to check it out. If you have seen it or you do end up wasting those 2 hours of your life, let me know your thoughts on the movie down in the comment section down below. But other than that, that's all I have for now. Thank you guys so much for watching, and I hope to see you in the next one.